Crane didn't lock her in a cellar. He gave her the lake suite, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking 60 acres of frozen pine forest, a fireplace that burned real birchwood, and a bed with actual thread count. Willa Rowe stood in the center of it and thought, "This is the nicest room I have ever been locked inside." She was 28. She had slept in a car twice, in a Motel 6 with a broken heater once, and in 17 different beds across 11 foster placements before that. The hand-woven rug beneath her feet cost more than 6 months of her salary. She was reasonably certain she'd seen this exact duvet cover in a restoration hardware catalog she'd found in the break room at the office and dog-eared out of bitter spite. The deadbolt was on the outside. She'd heard it engage, a precise mechanical click, the kind engineered to sound expensive as Crane's footsteps retreated down the hallway without a single word of explanation. Willa didn't bang on the door. She didn't cry. She took off her coat, draped it over the wingback chair by the window, and sat down to look at the lake. It was frozen solid, grey and perfectly still, beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they don't care whether you live or die. She had been Crane Export's senior accounts auditor for 14 months, long enough to know that the company's legitimate shipping contracts were real, profitable, and meticulously maintained. Long enough to know they were also a wrapper around something she had spent 8 months carefully not looking at directly. She looked 3 days ago. She hadn't meant to. She'd been chasing a $4,000 discrepancy in the Portland warehouse invoices and fallen into a rabbit hole that ended at a series of shell accounts, routing cash through Vancouver anchorage, and a trust company in the Channel Islands she'd never heard of. She'd printed 1 page, just one. She hadn't even read it all the way through before the office went quiet in that specific, pressurized way that meant someone important had walked in. That someone was Stellan Crane. He'd looked at the page in her hand. He'd looked at her face. He'd said, very quietly, "Get your coat," and that was the last thing either of them had said for 3 hours. Willa pressed her palm flat against the cold glass of the window. Out on the perimeter, 2 men with rifles moved between the tree line, their breath fogging in the evening air. No way out, not tonight. She went to check if the fireplace had real matches or if it was gas-operated. It was real. She started a fire, pulled the wingback chair closer, and went to sleep in it because the bed felt obscene under the circumstances. Crane came on the second evening. No knock, the deadbolt simply turned, and the door swung open. He looked worse than she'd expected, which was saying something, because she hadn't expected him to look good. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, his jaw was 48 hours past a shave, and he was holding a glass of something amber that he wasn't drinking so much as carrying around as a prop for his hands. Willa was sitting cross-legged on the rug in front of the fire. She had found a notepad in the desk drawer and had been working through the Channel Islands account structure from memory. She had a good memory, the kind that had kept her alive in situations less comfortable than this one, reconstructing the figures she'd only glimpsed, testing whether they held together. Crane looked at the notepad. He looked at her. "What are you doing?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Working," Willa said, "which is what I do when I'm bored. Do you have a calculator? I've been doing this in my head and I keep second-guessing the carry." A long pause. Something in his expression flickered, not softened exactly, but recalculated. "You're not frightened," Crane said. "I'm extremely frightened," Willa said evenly. "I'm just also very good at math, and the math is more urgent right now." She looked up at him for the first time since he'd walked in. "You have a leak. Not a small one. Someone has been siphoning from the Vancouver route for at least 11 months. Whoever it is has accounting access and knows your audit cycle." The silence that followed lasted long enough that she heard the fire pop twice. "How do you know that?" Crane said. "Because the discrepancy I found in Portland was too clean," Willa said. "Someone wanted me to find it. It's a distraction. The real bleed is upstream." She tilted the notepad toward him. "Your Channel Islands Trust paid out 3 times this quarter on contracts that don't appear anywhere in the master ledger I have access to. Either those contracts are legitimate, and you're hiding them from your own auditor, which is possible and frankly rude, or someone created them to move money out before the quarter closed. Crane crossed the room in 4 strides and crouched down to look at the notepad. Up close, he smelled like pine resin and exhaustion. There were 2 faint scars along his jaw that she hadn't noticed from across an office. He studied the figures, his jaw tightened. How long have you known? About the distraction? 3 hours after I printed the page you saw. About the Channel Islands? She checked her watch. About 40 minutes ago. She pulled the notepad back. Who has access to both the master ledger and the trust account authorization? Crane was quiet. 3 people. Then you have a short list. He stood up, walked to the window, and stood with his back to her for a long moment, looking at the frozen lake. Why are you helping me? He asked. I'm not helping you, Willa said. I'm solving a problem. It's the same thing I do in the office. You happen to be in the room. She thought she heard him exhale, not quite a laugh, but the shape of one. He left without another word. The deadbolt engaged. The fire burned down. Willa pulled the notepad back onto her knee and kept working. The nights were the hardest part, not because she was afraid. The fear lived in her chest like a low-grade pilot light, but because the house went too quiet and gave her too much time inside her own head. She lay in the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about her apartment, which was small and cold and hers, which was more than she'd been able to say about a room for most of her life. On the 4th night she heard it, a single heavy impact against the hallway floor, then nothing. She was at the door before she'd consciously decided to move. She pressed her ear against the wood, breathing, shallow, ragged, wrong. Crane, she said. A sound, not a word. Crane, I need you to tell me if you can stand. Then, barely, no. She looked at the dead bolt on her side of the door. There wasn't one. She looked at the hinges. Exterior, because of course they were. She looked around the room, went to the fireplace, picked up the iron poker, wedged the flat end between the door frame and the bolt housing, and leaned on it with everything she had. The frame cracked on the 3rd try. The door swung open. Crane was on the floor with his back against the wall, one hand pressed to his side. His shirt was dark and getting darker. His face was the color of old ash. Shot? Willa asked, dropping beside him. Sniff, he said, one of Osla's people, in the garage. Osla, the CFO, one of the 3 names on the short list. She didn't say I told you so, she said, how deep? A pause. Probably. How reassuring. She pulled his hand away and looked. Deep enough, too deep to leave. Where is the first aid kit? Supply closet, end of the hall. Are Osla's people still in the house? I don't know. Great, she stood up. Don't bleed out, I'll be right back. She was back in 90 seconds, moving low and fast, listening at every doorway. The house was quiet. Whatever had happened in the garage hadn't made it upstairs yet. The kit was military grade. She'd seen one once, in a group home where one of the older kids had lifted it from an army surplus store. She had always been good in a crisis. Not brave, just practical, the way you get when there's never been anyone else coming. She got him to the bathroom, sat him on the edge of the tub, cut the shirt away with the trauma shears. His torso was a map she hadn't been given access to. Old scars, 2 of them the puckered, round kind, and the new wound, a deep lateral slash across his left side that was bleeding with steady, terrible patience. This is going to hurt, Willa said. I'm aware. I'm saying it because I need you to hold still and not hit me. Something that might have been appreciation crossed his face. I don't hit people who are helping me. Good to know. She opened the iodine. Look at the wall. He looked at the wall. She poured. The sound he made was involuntary and controlled in the same instant. His whole body locked. His right hand shot out and gripped the towel bar with enough force that she heard the bracket strain, and then he breathed through it, slowly, like a man who had spent years teaching himself not to react to pain in front of anyone. When it passed, she had the suture kit open. Look at me while I do this, she said. I'm not squeamish, Crane said. I know. It's not for you. It's for me. She met his eyes. They were dark, very dark, and exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with blood loss and everything to do with something much older. I need to see your face so I know if you're about to pass out. Don't look away. He didn't look away. She stitched him in silence. 8 passes. Her hands shook after the third, and she breathed through it the same way he had, not feeling it, just completing it. His grip on the towel bar loosened as the pain settled into something duller. Afterward, she taped the gauze, washed her hands, and sat down on the cold tile floor because her legs had briefly stopped being fully reliable. "The door," Crane said quietly. She looked up. "I broke the frame," Willa said. "It won't lock anymore." "I know." His voice had lost the CFO precision, worn down to something underneath that she didn't have a name for yet. "You can leave, Rowe. Tonight. Take one of the vehicles from the north garage. I'll call the guard off. You can go to the police. Go wherever you want." She stared at him. The overhead light was harsh and clinical. He looked like a man who had expected her to be afraid of him and had discovered something considerably more inconvenient. "I'm not leaving," she said. "You should. You need antibiotics, fluids, and someone who can monitor the stitching for infection." She stood up. "Also, Osler is still out there, and he knows I've seen the accounts. I'm safer in here than I am driving a car I don't own down a road I don't know in the dark." "That's a practical reason," Crane said. "I have only practical reasons." She helped him to the bed. He was heavy the way that people are heavy when they actually occupy space in the world. Not dramatically, just solidly. And she bore it. She got him horizontal, checked the dressing, brought water, and sat down in the wingback chair to watch him until the shallow breathing deepened and steadied and became, unmistakably, sleep. She picked up the notepad. She kept working. By morning, the house had phone service again. Crane had lost it in the night. Osler's people, she assumed. But at 4 a.m., the satellite relay on the roof cycled back and her phone found 2 bars. She didn't call the police. She called the number she'd memorized from Crane's emergency contact file. The one labeled only K, which she had assumed for 14 months was a very expensive dry cleaner. It was not a dry cleaner. "This is Willa Rowe," she said when the line picked up. "I'm Crane Export's accounts auditor. Mr. Crane is injured and secured at the Lake Estate. Osler has been running a parallel account structure through the Channel Islands Trust for 11 months. I have the figures reconstructed. I need you to come here with people you actually trust, and I need you to bring a real doctor and a forensic accountant, in that order." A pause, a man's voice rough and alert. "Who authorized you to make this call?" "I did," Willa said. "Because Mr. Crane is asleep and someone needs to run this operation until he isn't." She looked at the notepad on the desk. "I've also frozen Osler's trust account access. He has approximately 6 hours before he realizes it, so I would suggest moving quickly." Another pause, longer. 2 hours, the man said finally. "Use the North Road," Willa said, "and wipe your feet. The floors in this house are hardwood, and I will not be responsible for what Mr. Crane does to you over mud stains." She hung up. She looked out at the lake. The sun was coming up grey and thin over the pines, turning the ice the colour of pewter. Crane's voice came from the bed. "You froze Osler's accounts." She turned. He was awake, watching her with the expression of a man discovering that a calculation he'd been confident about was significantly off. "I've had administrative access to the trust from my audit work for 8 months, Willa said. "I just never used it." "Why not?" She thought about it. "Because the job paid well and I hadn't decided yet." A beat. "What did you decide?" She looked at the notepad. "That Osler is a thief, and that bothers me more than you do, professionally speaking." Something shifted in Crane's face. Not warmth, exactly. He didn't seem to run warm. But something that had the same structural effect. The man who arrived 2 hours later was named Keefe. Massive, grim-faced, built like a man who considered doorways a personal inconvenience. He looked at Willa with the expression of someone who had never once in his life taken direction from a woman who came up to his shoulder. She gave him the complete account structure, printed from the satellite laptop she'd borrowed from Crane's desk, and a prioritized action list organized by time sensitivity. Keefe read the first page. He read the second. "You did this overnight?" he said. "I did this over 4 days," Willa said. "The overnight part was just the typing. Osler's going to run when he sees the accounts frozen. Check the Vancouver transit hub. He's had a contingency flight booked under a subsidiary name since March." She handed him a second page. His alias, the booking reference, and the corporate card number he used. "It's a subsidiary your forensic accountant won't find unless they know to look for it. I'm telling you where to look." Keefe stared at the page. He looked at Crane, who was sitting up in bed wearing the specific expression of a man who had a significant headache and had decided to be impressed about it at some later date. "Do what she says," Crane said. "She's an accountant," Keefe said. "She broke her own door down with a fireplace poker and stitched my ribs at 2 a.m, Crane said. "Do what she says, Keefe." Keefe did what she said. Osler was detained at the Vancouver transit hub at 9:15 a.m., 6 minutes before his flight boarded. The forensic accountant confirmed the parallel account structure within 4 hours. The Channel Islands Trust was frozen by end of day. By evening, the Lake Estate was quiet again. A real doctor had come and gone, approved Willa's stitching with one raised eyebrow directed at her, and started Crane on antibiotics. Willa sat in the wingback chair wearing a borrowed sweater she'd found in the supply closet, military surplus green, 3 sizes too large, with her shoes off and the notepad in her lap. The broken door had been removed entirely. There was a draft. She didn't mind drafts. "I'll have a car take you back to the city tomorrow," Crane said. He was propped against the headboard, a glass of water in place of the whiskey, looking less like ash and more like a person. "There'll be a severance package, substantial." Willa looked at the notepad. "I found 3 other exposure points in the account structure while I was looking for Osler," she said. 2 are legacy problems, predating my hire. 1 is recent, probably the same network he was using. They'll take you about 6 months to address properly. If you bring someone new in, they'll spend 2 months just learning the structure before they can start. She turned a page. "I already know it." Crane said nothing. "I also know where you're going to lose money in Q3 if you don't restructure the Vancouver route," she continued. "I have a draft proposal." "You wrote a restructuring proposal," Crane said slowly, "while you were being held in my house against your will." I had time and a notepad. She looked up. "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm asking whether you want someone competent who already knows the structure, or whether you'd rather promote someone who'll spend 4 months learning what I already know, and then charge you twice what I do." Crane looked at her for a long time. The fire had burned low. Outside, the lake was dark, and the pines were dark, and the world past the estate's perimeter was very large and indifferent to both of them. "The door frame is gone," he said finally. "You understand that. There's nothing in this house keeping you here." "There wasn't a lock on my side before either," Willa said. "I could have gone out the window the first night, if I'd really wanted to." Something moved across his face. "Why didn't you?" She was quiet a moment. She thought about her apartment, her car with the slow tire, the grocery budget she still kept on a spreadsheet out of old habit. She thought about 14 months of knowing what she knew and choosing to keep knowing it quietly, waiting. "The numbers were interesting," she said, "and I wanted to see how it ended." Crane exhaled, a long, deliberate sound, like a building settling. He looked at the empty doorway, the draft that moved through it, the broken frame that neither of them had thought to apologize for yet. "I'll triple your salary," he said. "Quadruple it," Willa said. "And I want unrestricted audit access, all accounts, no compartmentalization." "That's not standard." "No," she agreed, "but it's what prevents you from spending another year finding out what's been hidden from you the hard way." The quiet stretched. The fire made one small sound. "Quadruple," Crane said. He said it like a man who had just understood that the thing he'd been trying to contain was the only thing keeping the whole structure from coming down. Willa wrote a number on the notepad, tore the page out, and set it on the nightstand. "Get some sleep," she said. "We have a lot of work tomorrow." She pulled the chair closer to the fire, tucked her feet up, and opened the notepad again. He watched her for a moment. The bent head, the pencil moving steadily across the page, the absolute absence of deference in the set of her shoulders. Then Crane closed his eyes. The fire burned low. The lake held still under its skin of ice. Outside, the pines stood in the dark, like they had been standing there long before either of them arrived, and would be standing there long after. Inside, the numbers added up. They always did, when she was the one doing the counting.